because we shot this all in Paris, it has a sense of like, it's very emotional at times. I mean, I love playing this guy more than anyone I've ever played because there's a decency to him and a sensitivity and a trying and a sort of an embarrassment about, within him that I just adore him the more and more I play him. But going to be in his spots, there's dimensions of him that we're yet to explore, which is very nice. But it's really amazing to be in that spot and go, oh yeah, real person, real person.
Todd, I want to start with you. Tell us about what was the moment where you thought, this is a story I want to tell? Because certainly the names of Dior and Chanel, we all know, and yet so few people know this specific story that you told.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming and for having a look at this. Is the season finale of season 1, so that if you haven't seen anything prior to this, you may be a little confused. But we're here to clear that all up for you. I first came across the story of Christian Dior in 1997 on the 50th anniversary of him launching the New Look collection in 1947. And it really struck me then that these are names that I was not particularly interested in fashion, but these are names that I had been around me my whole life, but I knew nothing about the people. And to me, that's always a fascinating thing, that it's to understand that there's a whole history to these people. And then doing research, I went on to do many other things and came back to it years later. And the personal story of Christian Dior resonated very closely to me with a dear friend who I had lost. And so Dior's story led me to want to explore. And then I realized that, there's a whole movement here coming out of, one of the darkest moments in world history of World War II to lead to beauty. And it's Chanel, Dior, Balenciaga, Balmain, all these designers bringing their artistry to lead the way to bring spirit and life back to the world after the end of the war.
I'm curious for the cast, Ben, we'll start with you, about the research that you all did, because there's some research that's out there. There are conflicting reports about others. And then, for Catherine, for example, there's very little. So I'm curious about how the three of you dug into these characters and figured out what you wanted to portray.
I think the most useful thing was to be able to watch archival footage. That's, if you ever have the chance to do that, you can kind of get a vibe that is more elusive by text and whatnot. But I think there is so much, and there is so much conflicting stuff. But we were very fortunate to have access to people that that knew Christian and et cetera. But it's really just being able to watch him and just get a vibe, and just to try and just lean towards the spirit of him, really, more than anything.
How about you, Juliette?
Well, you have to rely on their research and their work, because they've been working on it for many, many months. So that was, a good start. But of course, I wanted to have my feeling of it. So I started reading books, different ones, and I tried to get a hold of people who knew Chanel, and I happened to be in contact with some of them, and a lady who I had known before, but I kind of didn't link that she was her assistant for about 27 years. And I was fascinated by what she was telling, because she wrote a law book and was kind of whining about how pressure she got from Chanel, but yet she had a lot of love for her, and so the contradiction was kind of interesting. And I was wondering how I could bring humanity into this kind of tormented and contradictory kind of a mind and spirit. So what we talked with Adam about it, but it was to lift this character so people could rely into, you know, some of the actions she has made, and it was not easy to play because she's for certain people she is a collaborator, and for others that I spoke with, she was not. So it was a very difficult kind of role, complex, but I really put all my heart and mind and time while we were doing it in prep, because I got a certain passion for her at the same time.
Was there a specific question you asked her assistant that you felt like one thing you needed unlocked?
Yeah, whether, you know, with the Germans, the Spats relationship, and she dismissed that very quickly, trying probably to protect her. Yeah. It's a very difficult, you know, how do you get to the truth of someone? You know, that's such a complex question, but you have to have different points of view of different angles to understand someone. And definitely Chanel had many, many different lives, you know, in the 20s, in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s, blah, blah, blah. It was almost not a different person, but another quality that she developed and gave to the world. So it's our show is very specific about, you know, that period of time and what was happening. And probably for Chanel is the darkest side. You know, and that was interesting, but it was challenging. Yeah.
Maisie, how about you? Catherine Dior did not talk about her time when she was taken by the Nazis. So what was it like for you figuring out how to navigate those scenes?
Yeah, there was an incredible book that I read throughout shooting called Miss Dior by Justine Picardy, and Justine does a really good job of painting an image of the sorts of things that Catherine would have been doing based on firsthand stories from women who were in the camps at the same time as her, and I found that really useful, more useful almost than you know, having like her words from her own mouth, because I could then start to sort of fill in my own blanks. And yeah, I don't know, I kind of pushed me to maybe like try and empathize with her in a way that, felt like a stronger connection.
I found her one of the most fascinating characters in the show, and you know, I'm curious, Lorenzo and Todd. I mean, I felt like I could watch a whole series about her as well, and I just it's a spin-off.
Good. Then you're going to learn in next season. You know, I mean, that's the kind of thing we would love to explore. No, I think, you know, one of the things that both of us talked about, which was really interesting. I mean, maybe just I hadn't certainly looked at something like this, but it's so interesting how clear-minded the younger the person was, the more clear-minded of what their duty was. That the complexities of, for instance, the Malkovich character Lalong, who had so many people working for him, he had to debate, like, if I don't keep going, do those families eat? The younger you are, you don't have that complication of that thing, and you have a sense of purity about it. And so I think that was the thing I really admired, was not only the purity of it, but then the withstanding torture. That's an incredible thing that at any age, but to do it and succeed at it was really a rare thing at that time. So there's so many aspects of who she was that, yeah, there could be, I think all three of these characters deserve their own seasons, really.
And one thing just for the audience, if you haven't seen previous episodes, so Catherine was a member of the Resistance and was arrested at the end of the first episode. And then in the next couple episodes, she's tortured to name names. She had been living in Christian Dior's apartment. Christian Dior continued to work and design dresses for Nazi wives and girlfriends, and his boss was Lucien Lelong, as played by John Malkovich. So as Lorenzo was mentioning, Lucien Lelong employed over 1,600 people. And one thing that we talked about a lot is that it's not as if the Nazi occupation of Paris lasted 4 years, and it's not as if 2 years in the French knew, oh, we only have another 2 years of this. it could have been the rest of their lives, the rest of the 20th century. It could have been, till now if the war went a different way. So Lelong made the decision to continue to employ 1,600 people, which was 1,600 families. And Christian used the money that he made. Many, all of them that I read about were conflicted about designing dresses for Nazi wives and girlfriends that were living in Paris. And Christian used the money to help fund Catherine. And then Catherine was taken. And so when she was tortured, if she had named names, Christian most likely would have been arrested and sent to a death camp. Catherine was sent to a work camp. So she really saved his life by not naming his name, not naming any names.
And that interesting question of that Chanel decided she would not make dresses, and what does it mean to do quote unquote the right thing on the surface when there are different implications beneath the surface, which I think that is something that the series explores so beautifully, not being willing to assign a hero or a villain label to anyone. Todd, as you were writing, how much was that in your mind of I need to not make this so clear cut?
Well, it was at the forefront of my mind. It was in conversations with Lorenzo, conversations with Ben, Juliette, and Maisie, and everyone as part of the show, which is, these are people making choices to figure out how to survive. And if ideally we as storytellers, and I include the actors and the storytellers, same with costume design, all of us as storytellers can construct something that the audience at some point, hopefully in watching it, would say to themselves, gosh, what would I have done if I was in that situation? Then that's like our goal and our pathway forward. So it's not our desire to say this person is a bad person, this person is a hero. It's just there are people like all of us, just minute to minute, hour to hour, trying to figure out what is this experience of being alive and how to stay alive.
I think the other thing was the politics of today are so quick to say you're red, you're blue, you're this, you're that. It's the same thing in so much entertainment. Well, this is the villain, this is the hero. And frankly, we were more interested in it's not ambiguity, it's just looking at it with a neutral eye and letting then you guys all decide how you're feeling about it. We have our individual personal reactions to it, but the more you get into, I think Coco is, obviously a very controversial character, but the more you get into it, the more you come to understand her decision making. Whether you agree with it or not, it's another question. But I think if you painted her as a villain, for instance, right away, you would never have come to see how she made these decisions, and you wouldn't see it in the same light because you would just, oh yeah, that. And I think that is the complexity that he brought to the writing that they all delivered on in the performances.
Yeah, absolutely. Lorenzo, were you the one tasked with getting in touch with the houses of Dior and Chanel and saying, what can we have? What can we borrow? What can we copy?
I tasked Lorenzo to create the first dresses for the show. We ended up not using those.
As you can see, I'm a fashion maven, so we have a great relationship with the House of Dior, and one of the interesting things about it was they were adamant that this was not a Dior-sponsored story. And so at the same time, they were equally passionate about us telling it accurately. So they gave us complete access to the archives. One of the cool things about the dresses in it, we used actual designs that were Dior's designs. Sometimes we had... I think sometimes we had to simplify them a little because, as you may know, about how long one of those dresses can take. But they are the actual dresses that he designed, and subsequently they've put them in the Dior Museum. Chanel, it started with Dior, we needed Dior, frankly, more than Chanel because there's so little about Dior available. So we needed their archives, whereas Chanel, there's so many books, there's so much information out there. And I'm sure they're a little conflicted about her story. We really have a lot to thank for Dior participating in a way with us that was very neutral and very available. I think Ben you went and sat in some of the places and experienced that.
Yeah, the Maison on Montaigne there is, which is the first place he set up, which is where you see the show. That's a real spot. You can go there. You can buy stuff there, and it's got all of his paintings up there and pieces up there, and it's really, because we shot this all in Paris. It has a sense of like. It's very emotional at times. I mean, I love playing this guy more than anyone I've ever played because there's a decency to him and a sensitivity and a trying and a sort of an embarrassment about, within him that I just adore him the more and more I play him. But going to be in his spots, there's dimensions of him that we're yet to explore, which is very nice. But it's really amazing to be in that spot and go, oh yeah, real person. Real person.
Oh, so just in this episode, right at the end when the dresses are coming out and it's the launch of Dior's fashion show, first line, there are flashbacks to Dior on a stage talking, and that's a flashback to the first episode where we shot, and one of the early days of filming was at the Sorbonne where Dior spoke in 1955. So we actually got to film on the exact stage where he spoke and presented dresses. So that flashback that you saw at the end is from the first episode, but that was an incredibly moving moment for all of us, the entire production, to be on that stage and recreate this moment.
Yeah, in the Sorbonne, where they've let next to no one access that space, etc., etc. Yeah, he's a really adored person in French culture, and rightly so, and as is the mighty. You got to give it up. I mean, for real.
Yes. First, Juliette, can you weigh in on how well he said maison?
Maison, very good. Maison.
Ouais. Qu'est-ce que là? Je ne sais pas toi. Attends.
Juliette, I'm curious, just what Todd was saying a second ago about just the different aspects of Coco Chanel and how you approach that. Really needing to, when I was watching it, one of the things that very much stood out to me was the things that she had to do as a woman in order to, that she wasn't afforded certain things and that there had to be this scrappiness to her. And I say that without condoning anything else that she did and how it's so important to, as a viewer, for me, to be able to carry many truths about her simultaneously. But can you talk a little bit about how you kind of explored that, being a woman designer? You literally see the boys' club in various episodes, and how she had to stand up for herself as a woman and figure out how to navigate this near impossible situation.
When you understand that Coco Chanel was coming from a background that was over poor, I mean, really like miserable. And what she's been through as a child, losing her mother when she was 11 and the father abandoning the family and being left in an orphanage and never came back. So, and as a woman at the end of 19th century, 19th century, it was very hard because you were born poor, you die poor, especially for a woman. So she couldn't, she understood the circumstances she was in. And I think during the whole life, she never forgot that. No matter what happened in her life, there was always a survivor wanting to keep what she had already gained, which was, bit by bit, her a shop and a perfume and the sort of the place because she was the star of fashion at just before the World War II. She was really the star of fashion and also internationally. And then when the war started, she closed everything, probably because she didn't want to dress Nazis, but also because she had 4,000 seamstresses to take care of and she didn't want to have the weight of paying these people and not knowing what the future was going to be. And so I think she came. I'm not sure I'm answering exactly your question, but what I remember is always as an actress is to always have this fear of going back to that miserable place. So there was that was really the tension that I was in touch with always, even though there were light moments and all, and because I believe that she was going through in her life, and that's why with the Emily Mortimer, who's playing Elsa, their relationship was really fascinating because there was this bond of those women who had to go through life, knowing a lot of artists at the time and feeling lifted by the love of art. And fashion was an expression of art. It might not be an art in itself, but it's a very creative world. And I think Chanel excelled in that kind of improvised way of being creative. As Dior really learned through architecture, he did schools to learn how to cut and all. Chanel was really on the spot surviving, trying to create as she's going, and it worked well. So they're very different, and it's fascinating how they both survived, because he was a survivor too, not wanting to be, what his father and mother wanted him to be, which was a more serious job. And he was trying to look for many different jobs and then found this thing. But he went through a tunnel of darkness. As Chanel, coming from not a bourgeois background, she had the tunnel to start with. So for me as an actress, it was always related to that tunnel in trying to make life possible, beautiful, and amazing, and that's she made mistakes, but the survivor in her is kind of fascinating.
And one just detail that I find really amazing for Chanel is that when her mother died, her father put her and her sister in a wheelbarrow and dropped them off at a convent, is what Juliette was referencing. And so she was 10 or 11 years old. The color palette of the convent had walls that were pale, that were tan, that were very clean, and that color palette influenced Chanel's color palette in her first designs, and was so present in what she brought for her creativity that without that convent, when you start to unwind it, she may not have been the designer, the creation that she reached for, what she put out into the world. So all of those things of what it takes to create a pearl, what it takes to create a diamond, a piece of sand, a little, imperfection, that history, same with Dior, same with the flowers, the shapes of the dresses in Dior's first 5 collections were all inspired by shapes of flowers that he learned while he spent time with his mother in the garden that she planted when he was young. And his mother was trying to escape, just another detail, that the Dior family made their money by selling guarno, which is bird manure. And so the phrase in the town where Dior grew up was that when the wind blew a certain way from the factory, that was the scent of Dior. And Dior's mother was horrified by this and planted a lot of flowers, so when the wind blew that direction, she could be in the garden and didn't have to smell it. And then Dior wanted to spend time with his mother, learned about flowers, and then the first 5 collections are all inspired by the shapes of those flowers.
And that's, of course, why he was so keen to put the fragrance in the first collection as well.
I love the moment in this episode where you see the flowers kind of morph into these beautiful designs, and I think we very much get to see Dior, a lot of that, and you see it throughout the series, but these things that kind of plagued him from his childhood and his family, and either feeling protective or feeling judged, or hurt or whatever it was. How was it for you doing the kind of looking back into his childhood, as opposed to the kind of more contemporary stuff in the fashion house?
Yeah, it was a really it's the opposite curse. You know, she comes from a dirt poor family, and he comes from a bourgeois family, but they are going downhill at a rate of knots, and so they are people that are just going down, down, down. And earlier in the series, we visit with Dior's brother, who's in an asylum and who's quite troubled. We have a dinner that is a little unpleasant. There's a lot of pessimism, and there's a lot of hurt in that family, and which is what makes Kathleen such a heroic and diamond clear kind of character. And I think that's why this relationship for me was so crucial in it. But it's just lost love. Everyone has it. You know, everyone has that time in their life where, if you've been through difficult times, there's a yearning for a time of contact, a time of innocence, a time of different sensory surroundings. And I love that he did that. And I had no idea about any of this and didn't give a hoot about any of it until I stepped foot in it. And then I just went, oh my God. You know, like it performs so many functions, etc. And, you know, anyway, that's my answer.
Maisie, you shaved your head. You went all in.
Gangsta.
What was that decision like? Did you go up to Todd one day and Lorenzo and say like, so I'm thinking.
Well, I tend to not ask actors to do things that I won't do myself. So that's
I don't know how that came about. I feel there wasn't really any pressure to do any of it. I just I guess I always had a curiosity of what it would feel like to have a shaved head. So
That was the inclusion.
Well, kind of, yeah. And then I don't know, the way the scene was written was like very powerful, and you know, the sense was that you would see the hair kind of go. So yeah, but like there were so many different things that I could do to play Catherine, and I really found like there's all different strings that you can use, and you can't always use all of them for every character. But with Catherine, it felt like there was a real physical transformation, and then there was also kind of like real separation from my own life and like a real mental transformation, and it kind of, well, you saw her in episode 10, and so she's sort of like returning slightly then, but you kind of see the whole journey of someone like losing themselves and then coming back again. And yeah, it just meant that like there was all of these different iterations to her and like her mind. And so yeah, with each block came a huge physical change, and like all the crew walking past me on set because they didn't recognize me.
The bond between your two characters is so profound and drives so much of the story. What was it? Did you know each other before? What was it like, kind of, because that bond jumps right off the screen?
Maisie wasn't even being thought of for the character of Catherine, nothing, etc., etc. Adam had no idea about her previous work. I did. I was mad for it, and so Adam had spotted her, and then Maisie came in. We did it kind of a chemistry thing, and it just was bam. Maisie was so serious, so committed, had such good questions, and was just such an awesome person, just very, very committed, very, and it was just very instant. It just was very organic, and we just kind of went click. And I also felt like I could rely on Maisie's strength, because it was very apparent quite early that Catherine kind of sets the pace of how things are going to be. No, I'm going to be a resistance fighter. Oh, you want these guys to leave? I'll leave too then. Okay, no. That she really is the bigger of the two of them in a way, and that's awesome. She's just awesome. So it's very easy.
Juliette and Ben, you guys don't even get to film together that much in the show. So how was it when you finally did? And I'm curious where...
Season 2, right? We have lots of...
We've got a bunch coming up.
Yes. what I mean, I don't know if you started with that or if you had each been filming your own storylines, how you did out of order.
The first time we met, I came to the trailer and said hello, and you were quite surprised. And he was preparing into Dior, and I hadn't shot a scene yet because
I was a bit overwhelmed too, because
But no, we have one scene together at the hotel.
yeah.
And it was very moving to finally meet each other in the acting world. But they have known each other before the World War II, and because Dior was Chanel's assistant for a play she was doing, but that's for season 2, right?
Yeah, that's a season 2 scene.
Yeah, she didn't like his work much on it.
Well, actually,
He
that's
was
a really,
stealing everything.
it's actually one of the very interesting things is she really freed women from the corset, and he put it back on. And,
I like it.
and it is
can I say?
fascinating because she really was designing for, well, let's call it the modern woman, if you would, right? That so there's a philosophical thing that's going on that underlines all this that we don't spend much time exploring, but the truth of the matter is they look at fashion completely differently. And so when
She was wearing the clothes, so she knew.
yes, that too.
And I was bringing back the economic miracle. I brought in more fabric from, I brought France back to his feet.
But and what I think is
don't see what the
as
problem is.
I was not as responsible for the research, thankfully, as he was. But what was fascinating is as the research was being done, the inevitability of the collision of these two characters comes from so many different things. And that's one of them. You just feel like any time there's always a movement or two that are in conflict with each other. It was a movement in conflict within fashion. And I think that's something that underlies some of the feeling in this, some of the passion, certainly some of her anger and frustration towards him, that she's freed the modern woman, and now he's unfreeing her, if you would, And I think that must have been for Juliette an interesting thing for you to explore.
Also because she came afterwards with the suit.
Yeah.
And that really was a big punch in his face when she came back with that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And there are also other pieces of history which would be in the second season. But so Dior's friend, during the war, they're all trying to figure out how to survive. After the war, they're friends and competitors, and they're in competition with each other for who's successful. After this fashion show, Dior is an overnight sensation, and Chanel and Balenciaga, who was well known prior to the war in Spain and fled the fascists and moved to France, and then the Germans, followed him to France. But Balenciaga, in seeing Dior's success, was quoted as saying that if this is what the world wants, then I'm quitting. I don't want to be a part of this. And Dior went to Balenciaga. This would be in season 2, so I'm spoiling this for you. But Dior went to Balenciaga and begged him to stay in business and to continue to design, because without Balenciaga, who is a designer that both Dior and Chanel revered, that without Balenciaga designing, Dior would have no gold standard by which he could measure himself. And so there's so much, as Lorenzo is alluding to, there's philosophical differences about what designs mean, where they come from. Balenciaga was quoted as saying that Dior manipulates fabrics in the way that fabrics are not meant to be manipulated, whatever that means. And Chanel with the corset and all this stuff, but it's what the world responded to and embraced. So it's fascinating to then explore the lives of these characters as the war recedes into the past and their lives move forward, which would be in the second season.
I mean, so you've mentioned it. So I thought I read the vision was 5 seasons, that you have this kind of, I know. So, I mean, do tell, what is the story that you want to explore in seasons 2 through 5?
Well, again, it's history. So when I say it's like the story that I want to explore, it's history. But Dior had a 10-year run of success, and starting in 1947, And several years in, he realized that he needed to figure out a successor. So part of the succession for Dior was him trying to hire a young designer. And a kid came in who was 19 years old, who it's quoted as saying was awkward and made everyone uncomfortable. And Dior's handlers, Madame Zenneker, who's in this episode, told him, do not hire this boy. And Dior saw his drawings and said, no, he's talented and I want to hire him and I'll have him be my assistant for the first 6 months. And I'll just spend time with him and he'll catalog my designs. Anyway, it was Yves Saint Laurent. And
That's what I'm talking about.
A year and a half after that 6-month trial period ended, Christian Dior dies of a heart attack at age 52, and Yves Saint Laurent takes over at age 21 the most profitable, most successful fashion house in the world. So the progression of the series would be on the Dior side, that incredible success that Dior has, which in many ways ends up killing him, his relationship with Catherine, how he tries to navigate the success, and then the handoff to Yves Saint Laurent. And Saint Laurent's story rivals Dior's for fascination, and his life goes through into the 80s.
And I'll be playing Yves Saint Laurent as well. Just for those of you who are
I was going to ask
don't worry, I'm there for all 5.
And then just real quickly, I know we're short on time.
Flashbacks.
Part of the fascinating thing about the Chanel story is that she's brought, at the end of this season 1, she's brought back to Paris to stand trial for her activities during the war. There isn't enough, so she is not convicted, and then she returns to Switzerland, where she stays until 1954, and then she returns to France to launch her comeback collection, 1955, and the French totally reject her and want really nothing to do with her. And then the owner of her partner, Pierre Wertheimer, who's in this episode that you just saw, comes to her and makes her an offer and says, basically, if you sign over your entire company, I will take care of all of your expenses for the rest of your life. And she does that. And then he says, okay, we're going to New York, which she does. And that's when she invents the suit that she's so well known for, because the Americans don't care about the war and what happened. And she becomes even more famous than she was prior to the war.
Right here.
I mean, it's fascinating. Who's playing YSL? Who's playing Saint Laurent? What's your
TBA, to be announced.
To be announced.
Okay.
I
had to try and get
But
something.
Ben's going to pick him, because just like with Maisie, it's whatever your instinct is, Ben.
I'll play him.
Perfect.
I think that would be the best.
Well, the show is extraordinary, and your performances are beyond. So I want to thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you all so much.